What is up, my Lorcana Goons, and welcome back to another Monday episode of the Meta Watch Weekly video. My name is Kevin. We are joined here with Zach Stone. We are the Lorcana Goons team, and we're going to go over Lorcana meta trends, tournament results, and what you should be expecting at your tournaments this coming weekend as we go over a DLC and some other big tournaments that happened. First, got to give a huge shout out to Edmund Chu for taking down the Taipei DLC with Emerald Sapphire. He is like a three-time winner now of these championship tournaments. I think 2 DLCs and 1 Continentals, which is pretty awesome. And if you guys got to watch the stream, I've been hearing this from a variety of people. The best Lorcana match they've ever seen. And that's like a quote from several people I've been talking to.
Yes, that finals game was incredible. It was only a best of 3 when we are used to seeing the finals of DLCs go into a best of 5. So I can imagine what kind of match we would have had if they even got to play more Lorcana. But Ed definitely earned his victory with that finals feature match, as well as getting through that whole sea of dogs that a lot of people were expecting. And I think Blurple took up majority of the meta share there. And I do think Blurple has lines and has plays to combat the dog deck. And we are going to be going over these deck lists shortly, but we want to talk about Ed's deck list here, just keeping it consistent. He's known for just playing his 4-ofs and not kind of changing the ratios as far as how many 4-ofs we're going to play. It's pretty much just a whole deck full of 4-ofs. But here we have a Basil Ink Geyser split, and we're noticing a lot of people, especially more recently the blue-green players, are cutting Hades. They are valuing more of the board wipe removal in this current meta, and honestly, I think that is the call you want to make.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the best decks that lets you win, whether you're going first or second, on the draw or on the play, as they say. And Ed Chu definitely exemplified that during the feature match, man. Like, it looked like he was down but not out, and just comeback after comeback after comeback is what Sapphire Emerald is kind of known for. So even when you're going second, I know sometimes in Lorcana it feels like you're so far behind, but this deck has the ability to ramp so you can match your opponent's ink tempo and simultaneously wipe the board multiple times, either with Under the Sea or Malicious Mean and Scary. I like that you mentioned there's a bunch of 4-ofs in this deck, Zach, because when you look at the uninkable count, it's only 10 uninkables, right? Now, if you're playing Hades in a deck like this, you start to get more and more inconsistent. Right now, the highest cost uninkable is Under the Sea, but it is a sync together card, so it's a little bit easier to get out of your hand as opposed to something like Hades Infernal Schemer, which is a 7 cost uninkable that might stick around in your hand for a long time. And most of the time, you don't want to play Hades unless you have like a worthy target, right? So like you're gonna really be holding on to that Hades for a while. But in this deck, it's just Cinderella, 4 Under the Sea, and then you have the 2 Ink Geyser, right? So just 10 uninkables in a powerhouse of a deck like Sapphire Emerald makes it that much more consistent. But yeah, the comeback potential is really strong with this deck. You have cards like John Silver, which against a dog matchup, they could be at 17 lore, but unless they have a way to quest, they're not gonna win the game. So John Silver, multiple John Silvers, can just keep giving Reckless over and over again to some of these high lore questers, right? So unless you've played into a go-go somehow, that game can actually still be yours. Remember, you have to get to 20 to win. Your opponent can be at 19 lore, and as long as you keep dropping outs to all of their characters, you're chilling. And that's what Emerald Sapphire can do, which is very scary. You also have Basil, which is a way to slow down any non-exerted characters. You're welcome. Even Malicious Mean and Scary just deals 1 damage across the board. So 2 of those, that's going to put 2 damage counters on characters even like Calhoun or even stuff that has resist, which is really strong. Emerald Sapphire, very good. But what do you think about Ink Geyser? Because we're starting to see Ink Geyser be somewhat of a mandatory staple in these Emerald Sapphire decks.
Yeah, so Ink Geyser, I think, is a very, very interesting card to go into and dive deep in. But what we're seeing Ink Geyser being used for now is to just completely delete the tempo that was gained, by just removing all the ink that both you and your opponent had in play. And because a deck like this can board wipe, that's what you want it for, right? Because if you're getting to accelerate to a higher ink cost and play these large characters, you're essentially able to remove your opponent's characters. And against any other Sapphire deck, if they're not consciously putting cards like T-Pose and Sales into their inkwell so that when they are ink geysered, they do have a way of accelerating their ink immediately after, character, it's going to put them a little too far behind. And I have seen a lot of Sapphire players really go in depth about what they're inking and honestly kind of remembering these cards, because they have to be conscious about what they're going to get back by an opposing ink geyser. And same thing you guys need to know if you decide to put this in your green blue deck and play it, because as much as of a card this can be, it does also remove your ink. So if you don't have a way of accelerating your ink as well or as fast again, you could be behind and you could also lose out on your own turns. But this deck having all the tools it needs to just get by the format. And don't forget, the one drop Clarabelle banishes items, so you're not afraid of any Emerald Chromicons that could come by any dog deck. I just love that you can always play this deck in any format. It's like the control player's true dream here, and it's awesome to see players like Ed take down another DLC. We will see him at the World Championships, and big shout out to World's Class Cards. You guys are taking over this whole competitive scene by storm.
The one drop Clarabelle is slowly becoming my favorite item removal in this game right now. Like when you compare it across the board to stuff like Benja or even like Hideaway, Cusco, or the Pluto Steel Champion, this is a one-cost item removal character that you can either play on turn 1 for tempo. You also have one of the best shift targets in the game, which is the Clarabelle light on her hooves. And yeah, just being able to also manipulate extra ink as a 3-cost character to pop an item just seems like it's putting this deck as one of the most consistent strategies across the board, right? Because there's a lot of different decks being played right now. We also have Blurple that was in top 4. And as we were saying last week when we went over the previous DLC information, we're starting to see people tech for dogs. And so obviously dogs did not win the event. Dogs was also not, I believe, in top 4. But when you look at the top 8, top 16 spread of this DLC, there was a lot of dogs. We have 1, 2. This isn't all the top cut, but just looking at these couple top 32 lists, there's like 7, 8 dogs already, dog decks that you can see in that top 16, top 32 spread. So it's still one of the most represented decks in the top cut. But now we're starting to see players actually dictate card slots to being able to combat that strategy. And here we have a Blurple deck by Loki in top 4, not playing any genies. No genies in this deck. Instead, we're just playing 4 Dumbo, 4 Iago, and 3 copies of Isis Vanderchill with 2 copies of Tigger bouncing all the way in our 4-cost slot. Now, if you don't know what Isis does, it's a 4-cost uninkable, 4 strength, 4 willpower. When you play this character, exert chosen opposing character. Very simple, but very powerful. Because of that, we have Rafiki in our 1-cost slot instead of Royal Guard. I think that's kind of important, right? Because if you're on curve, you don't want your Royal Guard to be swinging for 2. I think you pretty much want a 3-strength swinger so you can attack or challenge into their Lady Decisive Dog or stuff like that, right? So that's kind of important. And then Tigger, a very strong card to be able to bounce away an opposing Grandmother Willow, which is also going to be able to stop the dog deck. So we're starting to see more and more, I think, like tech options to be able to combat that strategy. Zach, you made a pretty good point. For the first couple turns, the dog deck just stares at you. They don't do anything, right? So you can actually disrupt them pretty easily in the early game, and the more characters you remove, the harder it's going to be for that Big Tramp to come down, and Big Tramp really is the bread and butter for that deck.
Yeah, and actually I kind of want to add a little bit more to the Royal Guard conversation here, because we cut Genie, right? That's Aladdin's final wish, and that is the deck's name. So Genie being played on turn 3 gave Royal Guard the ability to become a 3-strength challenging character. But without that being in the deck, you're really not going to start drawing cards till maybe turn 5 or turn 6 if you get a nice Demona off, or you start actually being able to play Woodchuck Guidebook and develop some tempo. So I do like the Rafiki in place of the Royal Guard with a deck built like this, because the constant ability to be able to challenge with 3 strength is going to take out some other characters that you could be playing against too. Don't forget that you are going to have to face against some Purple Steel or some Amber Steel matchups, and you are going to need to have some high swinging characters to deal with a lot of those 3 willpower characters. So this makes sense with the way the deck was built. Again, I think with Genie in the deck, Royal Guard might be a little bit of a safer choice. Plus, I do like the ability of using Demona and drawing up to 3 cards and getting Royal Guard a lot of challenger buffs. So it does work out, I think, in your favor. But this deck is teched out to also combat other Amethyst matchups, these 4 copies of the Iago is nothing to mess around with, because I have found myself being unable to deal with this character unless I have some actions or some songs that can also choose other characters to be able to basically banish any illusion that's in play. Does dogs need to be banned? I mean, they're not getting to play as much with a lot of these cards coming into the meta.
I don't think so, to be honest. I know we've had this conversation before, and although it would make the meta immediately different if they were to ban something, I feel like it would be too harsh, to be honest. Because rotation is just right around the corner. We have one more set after this current winter spell set before the rotation hits. And if anything, if you want to talk about bans, I've heard people, very good players, say that Elsa the Fifth Spirit is probably the most bannable card in Lorcana, but for sure in the purple pool, right? And then when you compare a card like Elsa to Ice's Vanderchill, Elsa is a 5-cost inkable character that has Rush, Evasive, and the exact same ability as Ice's Vanderchill. And look at the stats, 2 Strength, 5 Willpower. Like, comparing these cards across the board, it doesn't really add up, right? Because Ice is a 4-cost uninkable with doesn't have Evasive, doesn't have Rush, does the same thing, just exerts an opposing character. So I think with rotation coming around very, very closely, I think the game devs kind of are aware, you know what, we have to kind of pull back the power creep a little bit on some of these Amethyst cards that do these things and kind of let the other decks ride out, right? So I don't think there needs to be a dog ban. And let's go ahead and talk about the dog deck now. Here we have Alphos's dog list, and huge shout out to all the players that made top cut with this deck. It was like Zan Sayed, Lorcana Justice, Alphos, a lot of these well-known players playing a very similar list. So I'm not really going to go over everybody's lists because for the most part, we know what the deck is doing. You're playing some 1-cost ladies, and then you're following it up with a Grandmother Willow with another 1-cost Bobby maybe. You draw and discard your Lilo. Next turn, you can play the Big Tramp, find the Chromicon, find the End of the Sea, or you can even wait till turn 4, do the same thing so you already have enough characters to sing together with a Della's Moon combo. So that's kind of what the deck is doing, right? And I think Nani is what's keeping this deck more than alive, right? Because before, you used to be able to at least kind of make them run out of gas, and their only way to come back was the Shift Lady, which is a 5-ink character. So my favorite thing was always to banish the Lady the Decisive Dog or the Elegant Spaniel, because when you get rid of these, their Shift package is a lot harder to utilize because they have to get to that 5-ink. This deck likes to stick around 3-ink for the most part. So removing those ladies is for sure a way to stop that shift from coming down. But Nani is just a crazy card. It just gives them the ability to top deck some extra 2 or 1-cost characters they can utilize to end the game, like a Lilo Escape Artist or maybe even a Mowgli to snipe out your cards from hand. I do want to check out this 6-cost Shift Tramp. Very interesting. People don't really play this card. Now, why do you think this is in here?
You know, I actually had that thought of playing that card at the DLC in Ghent because there were some lines I would find myself in where I'd have like a Grandmother Willow and a 2-drop Tramp in play, and I'd actually have the ability to sing Under the Sea on turn 3 by shifting this Tramp over my 2-cost Tramp. And when it would actually come up quite a bit where they would spend some resources dealing with my ladies because, like you said, they are going to want to stop me from shifting, they would ignore this Tramp. And so it honestly did cross my mind, and I had the card with me, but I just decided to stick with the list I had prepared and tested with. But I have to admit, there was a couple times where I'm like, oh, this would have been the card I would have cut for it. And this comes up right now because, again, 2 + 6 is 8 for Under the Sea. So I do want people to kind of remind themselves that you are paying 1 less to shift this over that card too. So you can play that on turn 3 with 3 ink. That does actually work in that sequencing. But let me go ahead and just flat out talk about how Daisy Duck has been cut from the dog list, guys. It has been fully accepted that we don't need Daisy Duck. It's just not going to be able to be turned sideways into the mirror match until you've already won the game anyway. So we should focus on playing other cards and other characters that might be able to do a little bit more for us, like Rhino, the 1/16th Wolf. I like this card so much because it allows you to have some interesting questing lines against other matchups. Like, again, people aren't really ready to reduce the strength of a Captain Hook. That way you can quest with your lady on turn 2 into the purple steel matchup, and you do have cards like Della's Moon Lullaby to also help reduce the other strength of some characters and maybe banish some illusions that are being played in these Amethyst decks. But that's all done just so you can safely Under the Sea their board away, because we have 4 copies, and I don't think we should be playing less than 4 in dogs currently, because this card is just needed into the mirror match. You can't get away with just keeping one in your hand. I will go ahead and spill the sauce, guys. You should be keeping 2 if you know you're playing against the mirror match, because they are going to spend some of their ink to rip one of them out with an Ursula or a Mowgli, and you do need to keep another one as a backup plan. I personally ditch the one if I only have one off of a tramp, or I try to set up my lines to be I have enough to sing Under the Sea, and I'm actually just holding a 7-cost tramp in my hand, so when they do decide to Ursula me, expecting me to Under the Sea them, I'm actually using tramp as my Under the Sea copy, right? Because I'm gonna just draw into it.
So yes, the dog deck running pretty rampant, still very strong. We do have some other cool outliers though that are performing well at these huge tournaments. So in the top cut, I believe it's top 32, we have a Sapphire Steel deck with no angels, by the way. So if you guys are some Sapphire Steel enjoyers and you don't really want to pay the $40 premium for the angels right now, you can still do well without it. Here we have Lorcantito BJ with a Sapphire Steel deck playing 3 copies of Namari, looking like that's where the angel slot is gonna go. I don't really see people playing this card anymore, but it still seems like some pretty good filter that you need to be able to find some of your power cards like Vincenzo, Santorini, or Hades to be able to clear some of these characters on the board. But the Sapphire Steel strategy, I think, is going to be one of the most powerful ways to clear the dog deck, right? You're ramping so fast and you're playing such big body characters that the moment they even try to use Under the Sea, Della's Moon Lullaby, you probably already have more than one 5 strength plus character on the board. So it's going to be a little harder for them to wipe your board, right? But I dislike that Vincenzo only has 2 strength, because like Genie, he is like the perfect Under the Sea target. And I think that's probably why we're seeing people cut Genie from their decks, right? Genie on play will draw you a card, but you don't really care about having a full hand size against a dog deck when they're just going to wipe your board, right? But the Vincenzo's still pretty good because at least on play, it's going to deal 3 damage to something. But for the most part, I think when you're playing against that type of strategy, you really want to avoid playing characters that have that like 3 or 2 strength range, because you don't want to get got by Rhino plus Under the Sea or something like that. So I understand why we're seeing more Iagos in the meta, or why Sapphire Steel does pretty good in this meta, because you're dropping Goliaths, Tinkerbells, Pete's, you know, even this Namari is probably going to have a lot of strength by the time they hit the board. So it's going to be a lot harder for them to use Under the Sea on you. And you have a variety of removal tools like Let It Go, 4 Heralded Thunderbolt, 3 Strength of a Raging Fire, and I consider Ink Runner a like pseudo removal, right? Because when your opponent doesn't know they have it, they're going to keep questing with their evasive characters willy-nilly, right? And then bam, you can combine this with a Tinkerbell, or even something as simple as combining it with a Pleakley, which will have 3 strength, and you can swing into their evasive characters too. So a lot of tools in this deck, right?
Plenty of tools indeed. I think Sapphire Steel is known for just being more of a toolbox strategy. We are not playing Angel, so we are looking to shift our Jasmine on turn 2, and maybe not always ramp on turn 2, right? Because if we don't have Tipa and we don't have Sail, but we have the shift Jasmine line. And against these dog matchups, we can sing Heralded Thunderbolt to immediately take them off their Grandmother Willow tempo plays, and I think that's actually necessary against this dog matchup when you're on the draw, because once you are able to take out that Grandmother Willow, it's essentially done its job. Even if they're able to, I think that trade-off is fine, and if they're unable to deal with the Jasmine, you can then start to quest and look for more allies and potentially Pleakley your Jasmine away and have enough ink to drop your Tinkerbell on the following turn. I think you also have a lot of extra removal, like again, you have the 4 copies of Hades, the 2 copies of Let It Go, and you also are including all the songs and Vincenzo to deal with other Amethyst decks and other Amber Steel decks. I think that this is actually very well positioned to start doing a lot better and getting some more results in the meta.
We have some Amethyst Steel decks also in the top cut. This was top 32 by MC Bratwurst. Huge shout out for making it all the way to top cut. With Amethyst Steel, we're looking like we're running also 2 copies of Isis Vanderchill in this deck. No Dumbos. No Dumbos. That was popularized by Miss Lorcana from the beginning of the format. But we are still running our Calhouns and our Black Herons in this Amethyst Steel deck, which I haven't seen in a minute. It felt like people were kind of playing the Pocahontas instead, and like Black Heron was coming out of the deck, right? Christopher Robin was also being used as a 2-cost slot in this deck. So very cool to see the return of Black Heron and Calhoun, but I think that's because of the Isis Vanderchill. You know, you want to be able to have these 3 strength characters when you drop this 4-cost character to exert an opposing character. Lexington, also probably really strong on curve, right? Lexington on curve against a Blurple deck, when they drop a Genie, you can play an Isis, which is pretty cool, and just swing over their Genie. I like that. I'm a big fan of Isis and Amethyst Steel, but it is uninkable, and you are already subject to play like 4 dock minimum in this type of deck alongside some other uninkable cards like Genie and Calhoun. Maybe there's a world where you just don't play Genie in this deck too, and you just go for Iago, but you do kind of want the draw power on curve. This is a little bit different than Blurple. I don't think you can necessarily afford to run the 4 copies of Witcher guidebook right now because you're not really ramping, but you know, I think this deck could easily be one of the best decks too if we kind of pivot some more some card text to combat the dog deck as well, because we're still having a decent matchup across the board with this deck. We have 2 copies of Benja though to deal with the Emerald Chromicon, and then 4 copies of Yzma, which is just better than Dumbo. I think drawing 3 cards in a deck like this is what you want to do, as opposed to trying to have like a slower recovery with the Dumbos. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, the amount of Amethyst decks that are actually being utilized in this current meta, because we see Ruby Am still being played, Amethyst Amber also taking a recent surgence in popularity. Plus, you also have the Purple Steel mirror matches that you have to deal with. And the amount of other Amethyst decks that you are going to have to be dealing with, trying to get under them with cards like Pocahontas Following the Wind, it might not be needed in this current position in the meta. Don't think Pocahontas is going to be the card to fit in this slot against some of the other matchups that you're going to have to play against. And I do also see that we're not playing the Angel 624 experiment in this deck list, so we are not going to be losing to that other card into the other opposing steel matchups like Amber Steel, and I'd be more disciplined into the dog matchup too. So playing Pocahontas doesn't give us that opportunity, right? Calhoun is just a lot better of a card to be more disciplined. Olaf and Diablo do have an ability when they are banished or leave play, and I like the ability that Olaf gives you to return some of your characters back to your hand, like Giant Cobras or Cheshire Cats that are boosted, so you have additional cards to use on your following turn. Amethyst Steel just has all the cards needed to dominate in this current meta, and I am not surprised for it to still be taking top cut spots at DLCs.
Real quick, we're going to go over this other Sapphire Emerald deck that made it into top 32 by Harry Lorcana Japan, titled Pete is Udo, right? And we're playing 3 copies of the Pete Ghost of Christmas Future instead of the Basil, which Edmund Chu was playing in his winning list, and also 1 copy of Spooky Sight and 1 copy of Bend to My Will. So you can still add some spicy text into the Sapphire Emerald deck, but for the most part, it looks like you're not really playing any cards for Winterspell, right? This is the first list I've really seen playing the Pete. I guess some people play Moana, but I don't think you need Moana in this deck. But I can see why you're playing Pete instead, to have a little bit more of a consistency to dig for your board wipes, right?
Yeah, we're finding also too that they cut down some of the copies of Donald Duck and Under the Sea, I think, to just fit some other one-ofs and some other card choices. But Green Blue's core strategy is still ramp on 2, ramp on 3, and find your shift targets after that. And you are going to slow down any opposing game plan with your John Silver Alien Pirate, and you have the mirror match killer itself. Bend to My Will, this 7-cost uninkable action that says each opponent discards all their cards in their hand, and it's very, very important for the Clarabelle Wars. I think you actually want to have a lower hand count size yourself when you are pulling off this Bend to My Will, because you don't want them to top deck a Clarabelle and just refill their hand again. But if you're able to combo off the Bend to My Will after an Ink Geyser turn, let's just say for example you set up like a Sail to the Azurite Sea and then you Ink Geyser, you ink twice, play a Tipo, ink again, you already have 6 ink for the next turn, which means your opponent could lose the rest of their hand and all the cards that you bounce back from their Inkwell to it on the following turn. I think that card is very good. However, I do know why we only want to play 1 with its high cost on inkability. So again, Green Blue just having all the tools needed to work its way in this meta, and I think it's in a nice spot to start dominating some of these events that we'll have in the future.
Here we have the first place list from the 160 player Pro Play Games Summit. Very, very cool. This was hosted in Pittsburgh, and we have Ben Fishman taking it all down with Amber Steel songs, actually, because we are playing 4 Thunderbolt, 4 Raging Fire, 4 Akude Temuti, with 3 copies of Ariel, the Ethereal Imperial Voice. Now, I remember when this card first came out, we had high hopes for it. This came out around the Whispers in the Well last format, and it didn't really do anything last format. But I think with the addition of Akuda Tamuti, it gives it a little bit more flexibility, and you can even play it out early, which is pretty cool, right? So playing this out early on turn 2 with an Angel here, the underdog, means that by turn 3, you can boost it and already start seeing a He Hurled This Thunderbolt, which will let you draw some extra cards. And Amber Steel was lacking some draw power. You used to be just hyper focused on Dock or Bust with this type of deck, but now you have Dock, you have Nani for some recovery, you have Aerial, you have the Snowboard Stitch, and the 3 copies of Goliath. Very, very cool. Being able to play these out early is also a very strong way to keep constantly refilling your hand, and when you're refilling your hand, you can quest with your 2 Lord Questers and drop a Chief Powhatan, which is going to be able to kind of close the game out, because this bodyguard character has a 5 strength, 5 willpower stat line. More than not, it's going to eat up like 2 characters, right? For the most part, there's not that many characters in the game right now that can swing into this and survive. I think it's really just like Clarabelle and Demona that are the meta cards that can contest this card effectively, but those are like 7 and 6 cost characters. This is a 4 cost character.
Yeah, we saw Amber Steel pretty much come out the winner in the Winter Spell set, right? We have 25 cards from Winter Spell in this deck list. And I actually want to kind of look at the amount of 1-drops that we have, or the lack of. I don't think it's as important or as needed in an Amber Steel deck, right? If you are on the draw, you do have 4 more Angel that you can also play on turn 1. But even when you don't get to play Rhino, your Singer characters are just as powerful. And I do think it's important to think about Grandmother Willow as kind of a way to catch up. Even if it's just the only thing you play on turn 2, it's going to let you play characters like Ariel or Angel on turn 3 and start to fight back for the board immediately with Angel, right? And if you are going to find your Rhino and you have the shift copy, which some people still forget that Rhino has a shift in Amber Steel, that character will take out any early questing characters that your opponent decides to use, or you can even sing He Hurled His Thunderbolt as early as turn 2 and remove some of the ladies that you're going to have to deal with on the board. Akud Edamuti is just one of my favorite cards out of this new set, but it's just a powerful enough song to start getting these higher strength characters out early, and especially something like Snowboard or Stitch. I think that this character on turn 3 is just impossible to deal with.
Here we have a Amethyst Steel list in top 8 of the PPG Summit with 3 copies of Ice's Vanderchill and 2 copies of Fire the Cannons. More and more dog hate is what I'm seeing, right? Like, we're playing more and more tech cards to deal with that Chroma Dogs matchup. The 1 copy of Benja, you got Calhoun, you got Black Heron, and I'm telling you, curving out these 3 strength characters into a Lexington with an Isis probably feels pretty good when you can start swinging into their characters that they're just not choosing to exert. And there's a lot of other good targets for Isis Vanderchill as well. I think right now in Lorcana, for the most part, when you're playing an Amethyst Steel mirror match, you guys are just staring at each other, hoping neither player has a strength of a Raging Fire, right? But you can easily break that stalemate with playing an Isis. And in this list, Zach, no genies, no Dumbos. I'm liking it, man. We're starting to realize that although these cards are very powerful, they are just under the sea targets, you know, or they are just targets for like an opposing strength or a Thunderbolt even, which, like you're seeing, man, Rhino, shift Rhino on 2, sing a Thunderbolt. That's very detrimental when you're spending 4 ink on a Dumbo. I would much rather play something that could potentially survive. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Lexington, Cobra, Isis, they all died to the Thunderbolt, right? But like, for the most part, if I'm going to play a 4-cost character that's going to draw me 1 card, I would much rather play something like Yzma, which will draw me 3 cards, or a Tigger, which is going to have an instant effect to gain some extra tempo on play, right? So we're starting to see like these decks really cater to the meta, and I just want to let Lorcana players know, you know, just because you see like one deck topping last week doesn't mean that the following week it's going to be the best deck. Like, we have so many cards in the card pool that are kind of underused, I think. You know, I think we really just have to start throwing in these spicy decks and see what sticks, because this is an interesting list, man. If you would have told me last format that Dumbo and Genie were not going to be in Purple Steel anymore, I would have called you crazy.
I would have called people crazy too, but I actually kind of wanted to use this as a way to reflect on some common denominators that we're seeing amongst the Amethyst Steel lineups. We're seeing characters like Doc and Demona are automatic 4-ofs included in these Amethyst Steel decks, and these characters essentially draw cards. Doc is especially powerful when you have no cards in hand, because it's merely 2 costs for drawing 2, and it's a 1/3 body. So it essentially gets to survive, but you have characters like Olaf that can return return cards like Dock to your hand, and Demona just also just being an insane card without drawing you cards, tapping down your opponent's whole board and allowing you to start challenging with your high strength characters like your Calhouns and Black Herons. But let's go ahead and really dive more deep into the common denominators that this deck is using, right? I think across the board, without genies, without Demonas in question, that you have Cheshire Cats, Elsas, and Strength of a Raging Fire. All these characters, Docks, Demonas, and the three I just mentioned are always included in these Amethyst Steel decks, and I think that is its bread and butter. I don't believe it's Demona. I don't believe it's Dumbo or Genie that makes this deck the deck it is. No, it is the ability to have cheap costed characters that draw cards, the ability to exert opposing characters, and the ability to play Strength of a Raging Fire. I think Steel's ability to just have that card in the card pool that will not get rotated out on the following rotation set that we'll have. I do like that it is included as an immediate 4 of, and there's still answers to it, right? Like with Mowgli and Ursula Deceiver. So it's like a well-balanced mesh, and the inclusion of this list to have Fire the Cannons, I think, is even perfect, right? Because even in the mirror match, getting rid of like Captain Hooks or getting rid of Palace Guards, because if you still choose it with a Fire the Cannons, it will be banished even though it only did 2 damage to a Palace Guard. It does stop the strength count. I think that this deck is built almost perfectly to adapt to what we are seeing in the current meta and what other changes that its mirror match is going to make. It makes so much sense to include Fire the Cannons in this deck list and not play Angel because of what I just mentioned, the ability to do it on turn 2.
And of course, we have some other interesting outliers in these tournaments. Top 8, we have a Sapphire Amber deck list, which is playing 1 Cauldron, 4 Raging Storm, 2 Spooky Sight as our like big removal board wipes, and then we have 4 Let It Go, 4 Horseman Strikes. This deck is pretty strong. We've been seeing this deck make waves in this format. I think this is the first format in a long time that we've been able to actually play Amber Sapphire as a real deck, which is very cool. But one of my favorite cards in this deck has to be Ohana Means Family. This card lets you remove all damage from your characters, and you draw cards for each card removed this way. And you have a lot of high willpower characters to take advantage of this. A 4 willpower Moana, 5 willpower Pete, or a 6 willpower Nakoma. We actually got to see the power of this deck at the DLC in Ghent by Michael Rivera, which is pretty cool. And I think that this deck actually has a lot of legs to stand on. So being able to ramp into your power draw cards like Snowboard Stitch, Surfer Stitch, or your mass removal like Raging Storm and Spooky Sight, I think is going to be what you want to do against these like aggro dog decks, right? But when you're playing against a kind of mid-range Sapphire Amethyst or Sapphire Steel deck, you can really take your time and set up these like high willpower characters and force your opponent to have to deal with them in ways that they're probably not used to, right? Because I feel like Blurple, the only way they're going to deal with this Nakoma is going to be by using Hades, Let It Go. They don't have a lot of high strength characters to be able to swing into them, right? So they're going to have to waste those resources ramping you up. You can set up your Cauldron, you can blow up the board, and then you can just start bringing back your characters from your discard pile with the Cauldron. Very strong deck, and I think the Horseman Strikes is really what kind of makes you want to play this color combo as opposed to like Sapphire Amethyst or Sapphire Emerald, right? Because there's so many evasives in the meta. Even the Giant Prince, the Prince Philip, that's the board wipe, that's an evasive character, right? And that card can get kind of problematic if you leave it on board. It quests for 3, it's a 6/6 body. So being able to pop a 9-cost character with a 3-cost card while drawing a card at the same time, very, very cool. But this is one of the other reasons why I think people are taking out Genie and Dumbo from their deck list. Amber is a threat in the meta right now. Like, you have to respect the Amber ability to play Horseman Strikes. Amber Sapphire, Amber Steel, even Amber Amethyst, for the most part, will play some copies of this deck. So playing a 4-cost character that's evasive, feels like a liability when your opponent can not only pop it with a 3-cost card, but they get to draw a card at the same time.
I am kind of fixated on Nakoma here for a second because I'm really just objectively thinking about it into like the meta that I've been noticing throughout this format. And yes, it makes so much sense, right? Like the Amethyst Steel decks can't really get up to 6 characters to be able to sing strength and safely and cleanly remove Nakoma. And they also can't really turn anything else sideways, right? Because you being able to punish them with an Ohana Means Family is not something that they necessarily want to deal with. And all at the same time, this is buying you turns that you need so you can be able to use your 8-cost Raging Storm. So it makes so much sense why you want to play a character like Nakoma. It is essentially buying you time. Once players are recognizing that Nakoma is just there to buy you time, they might need to start aggressively questing, and then you can just punish them with all of the other characters that you have in this deck, and you can still accelerate your ramp quite well. And I don't think you mind even dropping a bunch of Cinderellas and Moanas into their board that you will plan on Raging Storming anyway. I think once you get to reset, as what they call it, that's when you can start stabilizing and dropping your other high tempo characters like Hades or Pete, and also boost immediately. That way you can start to find more answers as he quests away.
Amber Sapphire is not the only Cauldron deck running around in this tournament, man. In 14th place, top 16, we have a Ruby Amber deck by Mark Wooden playing 2 Cauldron with a variety of other cards that I haven't really seen played together in a while. So we have 2 Cauldron, 4 Raging Storm, we got the Ohana Horseman Strikes, we have Grab Your Bow, Beat King Undisputed, World's Greatest Criminal Mind, right? And we're even playing 3 copies of our Olaf, the Snowman of Action. Very interesting. So this Olaf says for each action card you have in your discard pile, you pay 1 less to play this character. It's a 4 strength, 4 willpower, 9 cost character that can quest for 2, and on play, it makes your opponent lose 2 lore. And no wonder we're playing so many actions in this deck, because we're also utilizing our boost abilities with this card, right? So we have the 3 copies of Scrooge McDuck, the Greedy Ebenezer, and you're going to be able to boost this character like non-stop, which is probably one of the best cards in Ruby right now. He's a 2/3/3. Every time you boost him, though, he gains 1 strength and 1 willpower. So the next turn he'll be a 4/4, a 5/5, a 6/6, etc., etc. And you can boost with and fill up this card with a bunch of actions, right? So that'll make your Olaf a lot more playable as the turns go on. Once this card hits the discard pile, you can do the same thing with your 1-cost Hercules. We even have some ramp in this deck with our Ruben Mulan combo, and then you have some power cards to clear the board: Mulan Elite Archer, Maui Half Shark, and a Copper. Very interesting. This Copper reminds me of Big Maui, right? The Maui hero to all. 6-cost Inkable, 8 strength, 5 willpower with Rush and Reckless. This is going to clear almost any character in the game that doesn't have evasive.
Yes, and honestly, I don't think you need to worry about clearing evasive characters, because the Horseman Strikes is the action you need to deal with those evasive characters. Plus, you have Headless Horseman, right? Like, genies are just non-existent with Headless Horseman running around. And honestly, once you drop a Maui Shark, are they going to quest with those evasive characters anyway? I think not. So I really like the well-positioned removal and the tools that this deck has access to. This Olaf also reducing your opponent's lore means you can keep playing it over and over again with the Cauldron. So just imagine you get yourself into a position where your opponent was winning the race and you start to just snowball, pun intended, with these Olafs. I think you can build a snowman that will eventually let you win the race, and 20 lore faster than your opponent could count to 20, and lots of other ways to remove opponent's lore. The Scrooge McDuck Ebenezer Scrooge, this 4-cost uninkable character, is also another way of just removing your opponent's lore while also helping you accelerate your game plan. And you have the aggro checker herself, Mulan Elite Archer, that can be played on turn 3 with the Reuben Sandwich combo. I love that this deck list is just taking the Storm Ragingly and bringing back everything you need with the Cauldron. Is just a chef's kiss. So keep cooking out there, guys. I like to see that these types of decks are doing very well.
Yeah, Lorcana's not solved, and this deck is proving it. And I'm noticing there's no Pirate's Life either in this deck, and I'm so used to seeing Pirate's Life Maui Half Shark combo. But you made a really good point, man. Bringing back that Olaf over and over again with Black Cauldron, or even a Scrooge McDuck, probably just means you don't have to play Pirate's Life in this deck at all, or maybe even with this color combo anymore. So this Olaf actually slept on. It's not the only deck in this video that has it too. We're gonna go over another deck soon. Amber Amethyst also made its way into the top 16 of this tournament, which is 160 players, and I like the Amber Amethyst color combo right now. We are playing for Willow, kind of similar to Blurple, an extra 2-cost character that lets us ramp into our Isis Vanderchill. Man, Isis Vanderchill's like in every Amethyst deck right now that's doing well. At least that's what it feels like. You also get to play Nakoma, so you kind of have best of both worlds here with this color combination. The Horseman Strikes, 1 copy of Ohana Means Family, a lot of different toolbox cards in this deck to be able to put you over the top against some of these Blurple mirror matches. I do feel like you do have a tougher time against the dog deck with this type of deck, But playing Isis, playing Tigger might be the way. I would even now that I'm seeing all these other Amethyst lists take out Dumbo and Genie, I kind of want to see what this deck would look like without Dumbo and Genie too. You know what I mean? And huge shout out to Fiend, who's in our Discord. We actually met at the last DLC, which is very cool. That's huge shout out to you. He dropped this deck list in our Discord because he got 19th place at this PPG playing Amber Steel. Another Amber Steel deck list doing well. No Ariel Ethereal Voice in this list though, but we are still playing all the songs with 2 Benja, 2 Chief Powhatan, and 4 copies of Angel. Angel's like almost too good not to play right now in this type of deck, right? But I'm seeing a trend, Zach. Only 4 1-cost characters in this deck. The 4 Rhino, and then, no other 1-cost characters. Doesn't look like you need it. So I guess if you could just shift onto the Rhino curve, that's kind of all you really want to do in the beginning, right?
Yeah, and you have a Coup d'Edamuti that can just reduce the cost of these higher costed characters, and playing them early is just the same thing as playing on curve, right? Because a lot of people are just trying to get to their late game characters, and if you are doing that 1 or 2 turns early, I think you're ahead. So Amber Steel is back, everybody, and I am an Amber Steel player myself, so I am very excited to experiment with these color combos in the future. And once again, if you're not in our Discord, make sure you're joining with our link down in the description below, and you can share your deck lists, because honestly, when things kind of stand out, or when players that we know are always trying to put in the hard work, we want to give you guys the recognition you deserve.
Huge shout out to PPG for hosting a variety of tournaments throughout the weekend. They even hosted a Sunday tournament that was a 2.5k cash tournament. Very cool. Luke Campbell taking down first place with Ruby Amethyst, right? And I just want to give a huge shout out to all the Ruby Amethyst enjoyers, that you guys know the deck is still alive. So don't give up on this color combination, guys. We're playing 4 library, 3 they never came back. Everything else is a character. It's kind of like the character mash deck still. 4 copies of Horseman with 2 copies of the Hercules Mighty Leader. This card is interesting. I thought it would have been like fizzled out of the meta, but looking like it's still making its waves. This deck kind of acts like an aggro deck though. Being able to play Lumiere is going to stop the opposing Under the Sea from the dog deck, and against all the other decks, you kind of just want to drop your 2 Lore Questers and maybe even finish the game off with the Queen, the Jealous Beauty. Very interesting. I feel like this card has not had a lot of time to shine. Has an ability that says exert, choose up to 3 cards from, choose 3 cards from the opponent's discard pile. You put them at the bottom of their deck, and you gain 3 lore. If any of those cards were a princess, you gain 4 lore instead. Very cool, especially when we see a bunch of Lilo escape artists running around. That's such a relevant card in this meta, so being able to shuffle them into the opponent's deck probably feels pretty good against some of these Amber Steel or Amber Emerald matchups.
I like utility a lot, but it's something that I always like talking about when it comes to Ruby Amethyst, is that its ability to curve out on the draw with 2 Lore Questers, Christopher Robin into Diablo, into Sisu, into Genie, into Horseman, into Demona, and that's just a lot of lore you can gain. I think that this deck could just also be as aggressive as it could be as controlling, and if you are ever in need of controlling the board and controlling how you want to sleeve up your cards, we have our team sponsor Pristine Protection here to save you. I have some purple and red sleeves, so I can also use these for my Ruby Amethyst deck list if I decide to. But if you guys are ever in need of sleeves and you would like to use our promo code Goons10 to save 10% off your order, which also does support the channel, you can use it here and buy yourself some standard size 70 count sleeves. So it's perfect for your Lorcana Lumineers. And if you guys are into other TCGs too, they do have smaller size for the Japanese size TCGs. And again, our promo code will be used as well as across the board with any other accessories they decide to sell. So make sure you check them out at pristineprotectiontcg.com.
Next up, we have a very interesting deck list. This is from the 33-player Winter Spell Frosty tournament, where Micah E made it into Top Cut with Emerald Ruby. This is probably the very first time we've ever featured Emerald Ruby as a color combo in a deck on this channel that I can remember, at least, because this color combo is just non-existent. Like, people do not really play this color combo, right? But we have 3 copies of our Olaf, the Snowman in action, which we were just talking about earlier. Being able to fill your discard pile with actions makes this card a lot easier to play, and when you're playing 4 copies of Strike a Good Match, you probably can just draw and discard any unwanted actions to help this Olaf, curve out a little easier. We're also playing 4 copies of our Power Line taking the stage with no Power Line shift. We're only using this looking like so that we can sing our for Education Elimination, Malicious Mean and Scary, Strike a Good Match, or even Heffalumps and Woozles. Actually, yeah, him being a singer for is crazy. I'm surprised there's no Be King Undisputed in this deck because that's a perfect 4-cost song you want to sing, but it is an uninkable song, so it does make it a lot harder to play. And I think Education or Elimination is probably a much better card because you can do this multiple ways. You can sing this to pop a damaged character, or maybe you can even sing this and just draw a card and give the power line evasive so that you can keep singing over and over again next turn.
Yeah, and let's also talk about how you can just accelerate some of your game plan by using the new Todd. This is a 4-cost inkable 2/4 character that when it quests, you have just the option to gain another lore or to give itself evasive. I actually think that that card is very flexible for a deck like this, and the amount of actions you play could also discount this Olaf to as much as costing 0. That's right, there's 9 actions in your discard. You can play them for free basically, and you can get there quite fast because on the draw you're able to play your White Rabbits or your Liquidators, which are basically Singer 2 characters, right? You're able to play them on turn 1 and they can sing your Strike a Good Match on turn 2, and you are able to just sort of navigate the game a little bit better. And I don't know, Kevin, do you actually want to go second with this deck? Because you have Underdogs and Hey Hey, which also is another way to come back when you're on the draw, or it's just very good into the Sapphire matchup.
Yeah, I want to see Tankster and Micah E team up and make a killer Ruby Emerald deck, because you have a good point. There's not a single 1-cost character in this deck. Are you just passing on turn 1 if you go first? Or maybe you win the die roll, you choose to go second, so that when you lose the die roll, you don't even care. You're always going second in this game. That's very interesting, Zach. Wow, because you have the 8 underdog characters and the Hey Hey. Really good point there. Let us know at home if anybody knows Micah E. I want to know the strategy. I would really like to know, like, if you're just choosing to go second. I think the biggest problem with this color combo is the lack of draw power, right? So I do want to give a shout out to Micah for adding the Donald Duck and the Scrooge McDuck, because there's very little draw power in this color combination. I've been just trying to make this color combo work as well, and Clarabelle felt like the best card to use, but maybe you don't need that. Like, maybe you are just choosing to go second, you set up some Donalds, some Scrooges, and since you're not playing 1-cost characters, there's probably going to be some lore on the board by the time you drop your Scrooge, right? So you can just draw and gain some lore, because you actually have to make your opponent minus a lore to draw a card. If your opponent's at 0 lore, you don't get to draw, but you do get his extra effect to gain some lore too. So it's an interesting deck. There's a lot of 2 lore questers. You get a lot of pressure in this deck as well. So I would like to see more people utilize the Emerald Ruby color combo, because I think there's something here, guys. I think there's something here. Also in top 8 of this deck list by Zach L, we have an Emerald Amethyst Burn deck. Very, very cool. It's been a minute since we've seen the Burn deck pop off, and I'm kind of curious to see like why it hasn't been played as much. I do think this deck is still very powerful. Some cards I want to mention that are being played. We have 4 copies of Tigger, bouncing all the way, which is probably perfect for a strategy like this, right? You just want to keep questing with your 1 or 2 alert questers in the beginning of the game. Maybe you bounce back up an opposing threatening 2-cost character like a Calhoun or a Black Heron, something like that. Maybe even a Rafiki, because it's going to let you quest out with your Scrooge McDucks, your Hey Heys a little bit easier. And then towards the end or middle of the game, as fast as you can, you want to drop as many enigmatic Inkcasters as possible. This card says you can exert this card. If you play 2 or more cards this turn, you gain 1 lore, and yes, that does include itself. So if you have 4 ink, you drop double Inkcaster. You play 2 cards that turn, you can exert both of them in that same turn. What I really like about this deck is that draw power is not a problem. 3 Chromicon, 4 Show Me More. That's going to let you just draw as many cards as you want. Even though you're giving your opponent cards to the hand, it doesn't matter, because in Lorcana, you could have 20 cards in your hand, but if you're only at 6 ink, buddy, you're not going to play all 20 cards.
Yeah, with the amount of aggro questing power that this deck has and the burst potential, I'm actually very curious to see why it's not like performing even more, like why more people aren't playing the deck like this. I think you can race a lot of the other Amethyst decks quite well, and you still have tools like Finnick to be able to deal with some opposing characters, as well as 4 copies of Tigger. This is also a card that can be used a little bit more aggressively. Just imagine questing with your Miko and then bouncing back it with that character, so you can just not have to discard a card at the end of your turn. I think that that's actually being underutilized, and we're kind of used to not doing that anymore once the Madam Mim package got rotated out. But I know that you guys can still do plays like that, and there's just a lot of ways to gain all the extra lore needed to close out the rest of these matches. Your cards costing a lot less means you you can empty your hand out a lot more frequently. And if you are ever getting to use Hey to accelerate, I think that that's actually going to be game breaking. So this deck should start to see a lot more play, I think, with the way blue green is also starting to get more popular. I think that this deck can just ignore what blue green does and just win the game by getting a bunch of lore.
Yeah, I think the toughest part about playing a deck like this is that people are playing Amber Steel now and Amethyst Steel, right? Angel also has a pretty good time being able to pop your Merfolks, your Mikos, and maybe even your Go-Go's or something. For the most part, when you face a Sapphire deck, you're going to have a good time. So if you have a big Sapphire meta near you, then I feel like this is a good deck to try out. All right, we have another Ruby Amber deck that we want to go over. This is from the Hunter Burton Memorial Tournament, 42 players, and in Top Cut, we have a Rewrite the Meta deck. I believe this was in second place as well. Very, very cool. It's a red-yellow song deck. We've seen a variety of ways to play this color combo, by the way. We saw the boost strategy from Lucas Kalpa at the DLC. We have a singer strategy as well. Here we have Aerial Ethereal Voice at 4 with a bunch of songs. Criminal Mind, Rewrite History, Imuti, Lullaby, Be Our Guest, and some power actions as well. You can't not play Horseman Strikes, and 4 copies of Ohana Means Family, which is the best draw power in this type of deck. Big fan, big fan. I also like the 2 copies of the Elsa Ice Artisan. At first, I didn't understand why we were playing this card, but it's pretty simple. Just on play, you get to exert an opposing character with 3 strength or less. And there's not that many characters that exert an opposing character. You know what I mean? We have Isis Vanderchill, which is what we're forcing into the purple decks right now. It's uninkable. But a inkable 6-cost character, 5/5, that exerts something, that's pretty good, especially when you set up a Maui half shark, right?
Yeah, and since you're only playing the 1 lecture location, just imagine how your opponent's going to feel when you do play it and tap down their characters. You challenge with your half shark and add back more actions. But I love that there are newer color combinations being played and being experimented with. This is kind of what I thought Lorcana should have been doing a couple sets ago, right? Like, we should have been thinking outside the box and trying to play with some different cards, but with the card pool getting shortened down, I can imagine just that being a little bit more impossible. So with Winter Spell out and with another set, Wilds Unknown, just on its way, I expect more color combinations we weren't expecting to do well start to see a lot more play, just like this one.
Same tournament, we have Snake Nitro, aka Max Halper, a dear friend of ours. Huge shout out for making it all the way to Top Cut of this tournament with Emerald Sapphire. But we're not playing the Prince Philip combo. Instead, we're taking it old school, man. We got the double heads held high with a 4 Under the Sea combo. We also have Stopped Chaos in its tracks, which is pretty cool. It's a sync together card that bounces back 2 characters with 3 strength or more, or 3 strength or less, sorry. But it being an inkable 8-cost card is pretty strong. And we're playing the Shift Jasmine package, which is also going to be able to bounce back any exerted character on the board. And look, 2 copies of the Scrooge McDuck, the 4-cost uninkable. Very interesting. I haven't seen this played since Fabled, so I get the feeling there's a variety of ways you can still play some of our favorite color combos, right?
Yeah, and also let's look at some of the other cards that are being played, like 4 copies of the White Rabbit. He's always late, but I don't think he's going to be late this time. We have 1 copy of One Jump Ahead in this list too. So if you are on the draw and you play White Rabbit, you can ramp twice on your second turn to be able to play some higher willpower characters here. And the Scrooge McDuck makes a lot of sense, just being a 4-cost 5/5 body, just being a little bit tougher to deal with against some of the Amethyst Steel matchups. And if everybody's playing Isis and all this stuff like that, like a 4/4 Lexington cannot deal with a 5/5 Scrooge. So you're gonna have to start thinking of other tools needed to take out this character. And he just quests for 2 if you want to ignore him. So I think he's even better into some of the other mirror matches that you could be playing against. You have tons of ways of dealing with the board with heads held high in the Under the Sea combo that we were used to seeing during the Fabled meta. And I don't think that that's bad at all. I think people are just kind of like moving on from it because of the Malicious Mean Scary combo with Prince Philip. But that's what you do get to have access to when you are removing those cards from your deck list. And again, we do appreciate people thinking outside the box, and Max has always done something like that approaching this format. So once again, congratulations and keep crushing it, man. I think you're going to keep playing in some more tournaments later on this month, and we expect you to also perform well at those.
Huge shout out to the Land of Enchanted 1K hosted by Tavern of Souls, where first place was Michael Romero. Purple Steel 505 looks a lot like the other Purple Steel decks we saw earlier. I do want to mention though, 2 copies of Angel and 2 copies of Fire the Cannon. Zach, looks like Fire the Cannons might be a card you want to experiment with in your Amethyst Steel decks, especially if Iago starts being a very popular card in Blurple. You made a really good point earlier. Iago is very hard to deal with in a lot of decks. You know what I mean? So I think adding Fire the Cannons into a deck like this is going to be able to help solve that issue. And having Angel in this deck means that you can discard unwanted Fire the Cannons and just use the Angel ability as well. So that was my issue with Fire the Cannons, is that it clogs your hand up as an unequal card sometimes, especially if you're playing cards like Calhoun. But maybe having Angel in this deck as well will kind of just solve that problem. You just discard it. It's doing the same thing, but for free. You know, you don't have to pay the 1 ink, which is very nice. But I do want to have outs to Iago now. I think Iago is like under-respected in this meta. Like, we're not seeing Hypnotic Strength. Like, not many people are playing like the Improvise anymore, or those cards to just like out the Iago. So I am a little bit concerned that I'm not prepared for that card.
Yeah, and I do want to kind of talk about how like a lot of other Amber Steel deck lists that are also coming out, like being able to just fire the cannons the Rhino to stop the Shift Rhino, or if they decide to play the Angel when they're on the draw, you can play another 1-drop and then fire the cannons the Angel to stop their Akuti to Muti whole curve from coming out. And Amber Steel also making its way into this top cut with an aggro variant. We're seeing Cindy Espinoza also make her way into the top 4 of this tournament with Amber Steel aggro. We're seeing Daisy Duck finally making its way back into this meta since Dog started to kick her out. She'll find her way to terrorize us in some fashion. But Tiana Aurora combo just being the bread and butter that this deck likes to focus on. And we're seeing 4 copies of David. He is the 1/4 bodyguard that has power crept our good old Jim Deere out of this deck, and the new bundled up Lilo also being a 4 of, with alongside its counterpart Lilo Escape Artist, to just add the extra 2 lore questing power that this deck didn't need help with, obviously, but got some more support with Winter Spell. And Nani again being a perfect fit to any of the Amber aggro decks that we're seeing, and it's also a perfect singer for Strength of a Raging Fire. No Grandmother Willow in this deck list, and I do think that that's important to mention, just because a lot of these Amber decks are just auto including 4, and I don't think we could do that with all the uninkable that we're playing, right? We still need to play Tiana's, Lilo's, Daisy's. 4 Grandmother Willow is just going to make the consistency a lot more challenging, and I think it's very imperative to start cutting some uninkables, and Grandmother Willow just had to make the cut.
That makes sense, right? Like, your strategy is really to go fast, right? And Grandmother Willow is not really a card that you quest with, so it does kind of counter the strategy in itself a little bit, contradict, I mean. But you do have Aurora Tiana combo, so if you open up Aurora Tiana, I'm probably not going to play Grandmother Willow, right? I'm 9 times out of 10, I'm just going to play the Tiana instead. So I think that's probably why you just take it out of the deck. That is going to be all for this video. Huge shout out to Cindy Espinoza and all these players and all these tournament organizers for continuing to host Lorcana tournaments. I mean, at the DLC, we did see the generic top 3-4 best decks, right? With, I didn't expect Emerald Sapphire to be the winner. I do think this deck is broken, and especially Edmund Chu. Edmund Chu's one of the best players in the game for sure. So to take it all down with Emerald Sapphire does showcase that you do have to have some type of skills to be a consistent winner in this game. But in these smaller tournaments, we're seeing a lot of outliers. Ruby Amethyst, Ruby Amber, very, very interesting. A green-purple burn deck. So I don't think the meta is solved, guys. I feel like when you're playing these huge tournaments, there are going to be some consistency issues if you're playing some of these, like, more niche decks. But when you're playing, a 40-50 player tournament, don't be afraid to take a Emerald Ruby deck to the field, man. I think you can do some pretty cool things in this game. Set champs is coming up soon. That's kind of why I bring this up, right? Because I know a lot of these set champs are not that many players, 12 to 30, So I think if you guys want to top your set champs with something spicy, I believe you can do it, right, Zach?
1000%. No, like we said before, this game is not solved, and I want to just kind of put out there that, like, we're seeing the meta change almost every weekend, right? We're seeing people adapt to what's being played, and going forward and beyond, that's just how TCGs and their metas will shape up to be. And if you're not looking to just be in keeping up with the competitive scene, that's okay too. You guys can still play your favorite pet decks. There is still more support being printed in each of these sets that you can experiment with newer cards with is also when we have to play Infinity format that and have access to the whole card pool. I think it's going to be very, important in having this like knowledge of like what cards do and what to expect cards to be played against in other decks. And if you're not thinking of the full card pool when it comes to Infinity, then you aren't taking that format as seriously as you should. And well, there are some Infinity format tournaments to consider. We have the Enchanted Citrus Clash coming in at the end of May that is also going to help us get ready for DLCs in Dortmund and Indianapolis that are Infinity main event focused. But if you're just looking to stick to core constructed for now, we do have a DLC in Brazil in April. And if you are local to the California area or in Northern California, this following weekend we have a CCQ in Roseville that I think competitive tickets are sold out for. And I don't have all the information because I'm not, we're not associated or affiliated with this organizer, but we just want the Lorcana community to be aware of what tournaments that are going on and what you guys can play for.
Definitely alive and well. Super excited to see what you guys accomplish in your tournaments. And if you guys want to share your deck list and be on this video, drop your deck list after your tournament runs in our Discord deck list section, and we'll feature it on the channel if we can. Huge shout out to everybody who's been doing that, who's been playing tournaments, and again, all the tournament organizers. My name's Kevin. You're here with Zach Stone. We're watching Lorcana Goons, and remember, like, comment, and subscribe because it does support the channel, and we'll see you goons next time.